Hopefully everything is running correctly. Alright. Back to Kyoto Winds we go. Welcome back to Hakuoki Kyoto Winds. Time for round 4, damn it! Round 4, I mean. We're doing Hijikata's route today. We're going to start it. And, yeah. Alright. Just making sure that this thing picks me up. Guess we're going right into it. New game. We're keeping the name Chizuru, and we're skipping the prologue. And we're going to be skipping around a lot. Prologue does not matter once you know the beginning of the game's plot. You just skip it. It affects no routes. Oh boy. Time to skip around. So yeah, skipping time. Let's go. We have 6 other routes. I don't know if I'm going to actually do both Saito's and Yamazaki's on screen. Because technically I've already finished both of their routes, so I don't know. But if you want, I will. Skippy! Back to this scene. Skippy. As fast as I can. We've seen this so many times already. Alright. Now we're just gonna get through all of the thinking! Alright. Thinking about what to do, and our guide says that we find a way to escape. There was nothing for it. I had to try and escape. Meaning I need to get moving immediately. Staying in this room did nothing to help me. Fortunately, they hadn't bothered to tie me up completely again, only my hands were bound. That would slow me down, certainly, but so long as I could move my legs, I stood a chance. Alright, now the exit is... I cast my memory back to when they'd brought me into the building the night before. Right, I'm sure it would work out. I stood up. Holding my breath, I edged towards the door, and I knew it was rude, but I had no choice but to try and open the sliding door with my toe. But I was almost there when suddenly it flew open, all on its own, revealing...
No!
I stumbled straight into Kondo-san.
ずいぶん大胆な方ですね。まさか逃げるつもりだったんですか？勝手に動いては困りますね。君の身が余計に危うくなるだけですよ。
His voice was calm and not unfriendly, but his eyes were frigid and calculating. Too late, I realized why they hadn't bothered to tie me up again. They'd been watching me.
逃げれば切る。俺は確かにそう言ったはずだ。
残念だけど、殺しちゃうしかないかな。約束を破るこの言葉なんて信用できないからね。
Okita smiled. He didn't look very sorry. Well, we're being bold and running for it. We ran for it. I had no choice but to run. If I was going to die anyway, then I had nothing to lose by trying to escape. Slipping around a stunned Kondo-san, I took off down the hallway.
お前な、本気で逃げ出せるとでも思ったのか?
He snatched me from the floor in one smooth motion, with cat-like grace. Uh-oh. Let me go!
話したら逃げるんだろうが、このアホ。
But I don't want to die! And there's something I have to do!
年派もいかねえ小娘が下手な断層までして何を果たそうってんだ。
Huh? Did he just say, girl? When I stopped flapping my feet and arms, Hijikata put me back down on the floor. Sir? I looked up at Hijikata-san, and he did not seem happy at all. Did you just say girl? I was scared. There was no denying it. Sana looked at us and nodded.
なるほど。やはり女性だったんですか、君は。
どう見ても女の子だよね。君は綺麗に化けたつもりかもしれないけど。
Wait, so all of you knew from the start? Was my disguise that unnatural? I wasn't quite sure what to think.
この近藤勇、一生の深く。まさか君が女子だったとは。
Ah, Kondo-san. Every time. Well, perhaps they hadn't all known. I confess his reaction put me more at ease.
命をかけられる理由があるんだ。ごまかさずに全部。
I looked back at him and nodded. Woo! And here we go, back to the common room. There I was, surrounded once again by the leaders of the Shinsengumi. We're gonna do a skipping around again. Because the scene is not changed at all.
何甘いこと言ってる。
今日の治安を守
結局
どうやら江戸からここまで一人で来たみてえだな。
Actually, I want to see if this changes anything.
荷物はわずかな着替えと一月分の小銭、それと数通の手紙とこの小立。手紙には幕府御殿医の松本良順の名前が。おそらくそこを訪ねたんだ。お前の目的は何だ。
The minute my name was spoken, the vibe in the room shifted immensely. Everyone wore a stunned expression, eyes wide, and no words were uttered in response until...
土方さん、その名前は。
おいおい、偶然にしちゃって行き過ぎだぜ。まあ待て、それを判断するためにもまずは君の話を聞かせてくれるかな。
At Kondo's behest, I stood up to speak. My name is Chizuru Yukimura. Out of the watchful eyes of the leaders, I sharply described how I came to face them, how I lived in Neto, how I'd come to Kyoto to find my father, how lonely the city felt before I arrived.
そうか、出身も江戸だったのだな。父上を探して遠路はるばる京に来たのか。して、お父上は何という方かね。
My father is Kodo Yukimura.
つながったな。
What are you talking about?
あなたが持っていた手紙の筆跡、これはまさに光道さんのものでしたが、まさか本当に光道さんのご息女とはね。
You know my father? The silence was enough to tell me that the revelation of my parentage caused a pronounced change in their behavior.
どこまで知ってる。
What information are you talking about?
いいから洗いざらい全部吐け。何しに今日に来やがった。
I just came to look for my father. I swear, I don't know anything else.
親父の光道さんが何をしてるか知っててここに来たんだろうが。
I was only aware of my father being in Kyoto for his medical work, but I haven't seen him since last summer. That's all I know.
土方君、どうやら本当に何も知らないのかもしれませんよ。
So what do you know about my father? Where is he right now? Please, tell me.
光道さんの行方は現在新選組でも探している。
You're after my father? So this means...
あ、勘違いしないでね。僕たちは光道さんを狙ってるわけじゃないから。
A huge wave of relief came after me.
同じ幕府側の協力者なんだけど、実は彼、夏から行方知れずなんだよね。
I think from here we are safe to skip ahead.
生きて
この手を光道かな。
We are given permission to stay here.
まあ、ゆうべ。
Alright.
ゆきな
不便。
ましとたい
な。
いや、
And we're also Hijikata's page. For real this time, not just by suggestion, actually. February. February 1864. Right. I slid the door open and met a breath of cool morning air. Clumps of thick clouds trundle silently over the city, and an unusually strong wind driving them along. It's cold today. I think this is one that we can also skip around. I shivered a bit and grabbed a jacket from near the door to wrap myself around myself. A week had passed since I began living in the headquarters of the Shinsengumi. I was given a room of my own, but they made it clear that I wasn't to roam freely. They weren't the best accommodations, but given how close I was to being murdered by them instead, I thought it was best not to complain. Still, do I really need to dress like this all the time? I sighed, staring at my feet on the cold floor. They'd given me temporary accommodations, but it wasn't without its strict conditions.
お前の身柄は新選組預かりとする。が、女として屯所へ置くわけにはいかねえ。新選組にかくまわれている女がいる。そんな話が万一にも広まれば、よくねえ勘繰りをする奴も出てくる。それに、噂を聞いて行動さんを狙っている奴らが、お前まで狙い出すかもしれねえ。もちろん、行動さんが狙われていると確定したわけじゃねえ。こういう不確定要素が多い現状で迂闊な行動は取れねえってことだ。だからお前には断層を続けてもらう。面倒だろうね。それでいい。
Clear. His reasoning was sound. Perhaps more than that, I knew he was concerned for not only for the Shinsengumi, but also for the safety of my father and myself. I didn't have a choice, regardless. But keeping this in mind made his orders more palatable.
それに、たとえ君にその気がなくとも、女性の存在は体内の風紀を乱しかねね。ですから私たち幹部のほか、大使たちへも君の事情は話しません。情報はそれこそどこから広まるかわかりませんからね。
I understand the situation. So what should I do while I'm here?
屯所じゃ何もしなくていい。部屋を一つやるから引きこもってろ。
あれおかしいな。この子誰かさんの故障になるんじゃなかったですか？
いいか掃除。てめえは余計な口出しせずに黙ってろ。
Before long, I'd been there for a week. I guess I don't have much of a choice. No sense in dwelling on what I can't do, after all. Although it was still a new sensation, I'd grown comfortable in dressing like a boy, particularly the feeling of wearing pants. I straightened up and touched the kodachi the Hijikata had given back to me. According to my father, this was an important heirloom passed down through the Yukimura clan. As such, I was forced to take lessons in swordplay, making me well aware of what the blade was capable of. I had never cared much for weapons. Weapons hurt people, which is an obvious factor. But it was more than that, at least for me. For as far back as I could remember, any wounds I suffered healed at an incredible rate. Small cuts would disappear overnight. As a child, I thought nothing of it, but as I grew older, I began to realize what I was not quite normal. That I was not quite normal. My father insisted it was a gift of the gods, but that I should tell no one of it. I didn't tell anyone, of course. I was afraid they would treat me like a monster if they knew. Ever since then, I'd done my best not to get hurt. I stayed as far away from blades as I could, and before I realized it, I developed a fear of them. My constant need for disguise was frustrating, but my condition left me more unsettled. Still, that wasn't the only thing on my mind. The rank-and-file soldiers treated me coldly. I'm not just imagining it, right? I learned having a private room was a privilege even for captains. For a child to arrive and receive better treatment than their own captains, no surprise, really, for the soldiers to hate me. True. I suppose I can't really blame them. Whew. I was enjoying the Shinsengumi's hospitality, and so I felt I should help them in some way. But I knew nothing of soldiers and their ways. I gave as much effort as possible despite Hijikata's command for me to remain in my room. How does one calm the lonely, restless mind? I think for the soldiers, whenever the captains or other officers would look out for me, it appears as if they were giving me special treatment. They're just watching me. To make sure I kept my mouth shut, they took turns keeping watch over me. Any mistake on my part would cause huge trouble, so they were making an effort to keep me contained. Even if I could speak with the soldiers, what conversations would we share? Nothing? My only respite from... God, I'm very yawny. I woke up from a nap, and it's still cloudy outside, which means it's rain, which means I'm a sleepy person. My only respite from a possibility of detection would be to stay alone. Again. All I wanted from this, though, was to find my father. Even though they'd promised to help me, keeping me locked here without the ability to leave was no better than being tied up. Just when it felt like I'd made some progress into my journey, my search was kept to a halt. Oh God. Perhaps, I thought, I could talk to Hijikata-san. If he would give me permission to look for my father. Oh no. That's right. Hijikata-san just recently departed to Osaka. Well, if Hijikata-san's not here, I wasn't sure what to do. I think we've done... Have we done all three? I think we've done all three, yeah. So now we just stay put. And we're gonna skip. Because this is the one where Kondo finds us and brings us konpeito and tea. Yeah, this is the one. Hijikata had, of course, failed to tell Kono that I had yet to be made a page. I wasn't surprised. Alright. Then he placed a tray on the floor between us. This is... I looked down on the tray. I could barely stifle a sudden squeal of excitement. Yeah, he said konpeito. We got some sugar stars. They're still next to my desk. I literally use konpeito as like little things of sugar when I have tea at my desk. So I don't have to put actual sugar in the kitchen. I just have a little jar full of them and I dissolve them in tea. Occasionally I will snack on them, but mostly it is for sugar. Because they are sugar. And now we skip. Hijikata? Caring? I could see that. That didn't seem right. But then again, wait, did I pick the right one? No, not Skippery, damn it. Did I mess it up? I wasn't paying attention. Hold on. No! Is that the choice I picked? I'm sorry, my brain is it's just. Yeah, okay, I did choose the right one. Rewind. Okay, there we go. That didn't seem right, but then again, I told myself Kondo-san knows him better than I do.
ちょっと厳しいところがあるかもしれんが、今回の件も君を思ってのことだろう。
I guess that has to be the case. If the commander doesn't think it's time for me to leave yet, then I should trust him. I'm sure you all know what's out there better than I do. I hadn't spent much time with him, but it was obvious that Hijikata-san was no fool. He was intimidating, of course, but he was a man of good intentions.
俺からも都市には伝えておこう。退屈だろうが、もうしばらく我慢してくれ。
Alright, thank you. He hadn't done much, but to be honest, Kondo-san's visit had cheered me up greatly. Of course, the conditions of staying in my room were left unchanged. However, the creature comforts of spending an afternoon drinking warm tea gave me some life. Oh no. Oh no, oh, we're skipping this. It is dinner time, and Nokita being a little shit eavesdropping little. Ugh. I missed the Okita we had. He's reverted.
あのさ、飯の時間なんだけど。
すまん。
ああ。年も近いからその方がしっくりするし。あとそのデスマスもやめようぜ。
If someone says don't use honorifics, don't use honorifics like Heisuke. Heisuke is just fine being Heisuke.
ようやく来たか。おめ。
Da da da.
今日じゃ。
They're all very protective of their food, if you haven't guessed. Skippy, Skippy. Skip, 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 skip. Sanon-san is hurt, his arm. Unsure if he can usually use his arm at this point. And then... Just a little bit. And we're supposed to not think about the Furies, but we keep thinking about the Furies, and we go to bed. We're now in March. March 1864. It fast approached a month since I began living within the Shinsengumi headquarters. Hijikata-san and Sanon-san finally returned to the compound from their trip to Osaka, but spirits were low. Sanon-san's injury had unforeseen consequences for everyone in the organization. Day-to-day operations became hectic for a little while. His wounds seemed quite dire, and they drained whatever goodness in his nature he'd hoped to keep. Sanon-san would spend days holed up in his room, protected by a barrier of impenetrable silence. If he were to leave his room, a rare occasion now, he was short-tempered and quickly retreated. Even though I too spent days in the exile of my room, he seemed to take it much differently. This is where we go into the common room and ask for Hijikata, but we run into fucking Takeda! There he is. There's Takeda. Please. We'll get to him at some point. We will. We will. But now he's just a petulant child, as the text calls him.
おい武田、こんなところで何をしている。
He recognized Hijikata-san's voice. He snapped his hand back to his side before he was about to fucking grab me by the collar.
これは土方副長。何、近藤局長に少々用がありましてね。
ほう。俺は何も聞いちゃいないんだ。
最近お姿が見えない三段総長の代わりに相談に乗ってほしいと言われているのです。しかし近藤局長もいらっしゃらないようなので、私はこれで失礼します。
Takeda turned to take his leave, but then he slowed his step, leaving us with a few words.
ところで、土方副長。そのものを故障に取り立てたというのは本当ですか？
ああ、少しばかり訳ありでな。
承知しました。訳ありならば、詳しく聞くのはやめておきましょう。ですが、あまり同じ郷里のものばかりを周りに囲うのはいかがなものかと思います。では、失礼。
Once Takeda exited the hall, I couldn't help but feel a rush of relief.
おい、雪村。本所の中を勝手に歩くんじゃねえ。
Yes, sir. I didn't mean to cause trouble.
お前の正体を知っているのはこのヤギ邸に寝起きしてるやつだけだ。前川邸からこっちに来るやつらには気をつけろ。
Clear. I promise to be more careful going forward. So may I ask who that man was?
あいつか。5番組組長の武田官流斎ってやつだ。腕はそこそこだが、文学だか軍学の多少の知恵を持ってるやつだ。
See, now I'm questioning, what exactly is military science?
抜け目のないやつだからな。気をつけろ。それから、用がないならお前もこの辺でうろうろしてないで部屋に戻っていろ。
Hijikata-san attempted to dismiss me, having said what he felt was appropriate as a stern commander. I asked Hijikata-san if I can help around the compound, because we're bored. And we feel useless. I didn't get many chances to see Hijikata-san, so I took the opportunity to offer my aid to the house. Actually, I have a favor to ask of you, Hijikata-san. Staying in my room for long periods alone makes me feel terribly useless. Would you please give me something to do? I'll do anything. Cleaning, laundry, anything. Hijikata-san sensed the sincerity of my plea, and it appeared as though he actually considered it.
部屋にこもっているのはそんなに退屈か?
Well, a little.
わかった。源さんに伝えておくから、後で指示を仰ぐ。
Really?
その代わり、あまり外から来たやつと関わるんじゃねえぞ。いいな。
Hi. But, thank you so much. The next day, Inoue informed me that I was given more freedom within the headquarters, which allowed me to exit my room freely. My duties included cleaning, laundry, and cooking. Not the most glamorous of chores, but of course. However, it gave me an opportunity to occupy myself as opposed to going stir-crazy in my room. I'd rather not be stir-crazy, thank you. 1864, June. Oh. June 1864. The fourth year of the Bunkyu era became the Ganji Ganon, and the summer sweetly blossomed. Spring shed its blossoming skin, giving birth to lush green trees facing the wide open sky. During one of these beautiful summer days, I finished cleaning after everyone ate breakfast, and Saito brought me to the hall to Hijikata-san.
副長、斉藤です。雪村を連れて参りました。
入れ。
Saito-san responded by quietly opening the sliding doors, gesturing me to enter the room. Ah, this is...
随分と長く待たせたな。
I get to go out. I get to go outside.
だから、
今日はたこん
何？
でも他の大使たちは完全にそうしうす
Alright, we can keep going. And what are we gonna do? We're gonna accompany Hijikata-san as his page. In that case, please allow me to accompany you, Hijikata-san.
おい、お前まで何を言い出すんだ。
Hijikata-san's voice trembled irritably, as if troubled by my suggestion, which made me nervous, but I thought I had a shot in convincing him. I mean, walking around town with you may help with getting leads to find my father. With the other warriors questioning my place, it may be in our best interest for me to act like your page. It could convince the others. I recalled, in this moment, my introduction to Takeda, who voiced his skepticism plainly. Instead of sharing my point of view, Hijikata-san's expression soured. Then he responded.
あのな、宗司の言うことをバカ正直に受け取るんじゃねえ。こいつは面白がってる。
可愛い故障ができてよかったですね、土方さん。
God damn it, Soji! Hijikata-san stared bitterly towards Okita, and then, and again, it seemed we were trapped in their bubble of silence, but eventually...
わかった。ただし、俺の仕事の邪魔はするんじゃねえぞ。
I understand. I was somewhat surprised he obliged me, but I was so excited to join Hijikata and go outside. It's been almost 5 months since I've been able to experience the world and its I was going to say sincerity, but it's scenery.
どうしてこんなことになっちまったんだ。
You're stuck with us, sir! Hijikata-san kept himself a few paces ahead of me, deliberately, and his foul mood made me nervous. His cold demeanor caused me to question whether or not I'd belong there, if this was my place. It was difficult to turn these questions to and fro in my head, but I was trying to keep up with him. Someone called out as we passed a tea shop.
副長、こちらにいらっしゃいましたか。実はご報告しなければならないことがありまして。
If this person referred to Hijikata-san as commander, then he must be a Shinsengumi member. He whispered the report in Hijikata-san's ear. The man's words caused Hijikata-san's face to turn blank, and he looked to me to speak.
給与まで来た。お前はこの店に残ってコードさんの聞き込みをしている。
But then I'd be by myself. Would that be alright with you? In response, Hijikata-san gave me an examining glance, as if to probe all of my hidden thoughts, then looked down at me while asking,
お前は逃げるために俺にくっついてきた。
When his eyes met mine, the pit of my stomach dropped, turning cold from nervousness. No, of course not.
ならつまらねえ質問するんじゃねえ。やることをやって待ってろ。いいな。
Understood. I wasn't sure what Hijikata-san's intentions were by leaving me behind, but it was probably smarter to do as Hijikata-san said, so I asked the person at the shop about my father. Oh, I know what this scene is. Okay, where to start? I asked customers that wandered in and out of the store politely, grabbing their attention. Unfortunately, it seemed like no one knew anything about my father's whereabouts. My tea became cold, the little leaf flakes sinking towards the bottom of the cup, and I sighed.
神妙にしろ。新選組の御用改めだ。ここの主人はどこにいる？
Oh, that means that Hijikata does rounds with Takeda. That makes sense because nobody fucking else is going to tolerate Takeda. I recognized the shouting man by his familiar corpse uniform as he barged into the shop. It was Takeda, the captain of the Shinsengumi's 5th Division. What could he be doing here?
私がこの店の主人ですが、本日は一体どのようなご用向きで？
The owner's voice was trembling from being intimidated, and Takeda responded forcefully.
分かりきったことを。何でもお前はこの店に尊上過激派の老師を出入りさせているらしいではないか。一体何を企んでいる？答えによっては豚書に連れ帰り、詳しく審議させてもらうぞ。
めっそうもない。そのようなものを出入りさせたことなどございません。
ほう。つまり我々新選組がデタラメを言っているとそう申すのだな。
いえ、そういうわけでは。
Sweat poured down the owner's face, and he shook with fear. Takeda glanced around the store with a sticky glare. I quickly ducked behind a shelf so he wouldn't notice me. I managed to avoid detection as he scanned the store. Then Takeda approached the owner again.
我々とて善良な民の商いの邪魔をしたいわけではない。お前の態度によってはタイへの報告を取りやめてやっても構わんのだが。
それはつまり。
お前の誠意を見せてみろと言っているのだ。
He's a bastard. As I peeked to get a closer view of their conversation, I could see the owner gulp. Although Takeda was not being explicit, it was deathly clear that he was soliciting a bribe from the shop owner.
そのようなことはできません。そもそも我々には何らやましいことなどありませんから。
なんだと？貴様、今日の治安を預かる新選組に盾つくつもりか？
いえ、決してそのようなことは。
豚書まで連行する。老子どもの手助けをしているに違いない。連れ帰って口を割らせてやる。
そんな。
Oh no! I was sick to my stomach hearing him. I'm always sick to my stomach hearing Takeda. Just when I was about to speak out, someone placed their hand on my shoulder.
ダメですよ。女の子が危ない真似をしちゃ大怪我するから。
There's a familiar face. This mysterious samurai whispered gently into my ear, but I became completely distracted by his perfectly sculpted facial features. His skin looked incredibly fair and soft, and he was almost as gorgeous as Hijikata-san. For a second, I thought he was an actor. He was dressed in expensive, exotic-looking fabrics, leading me to believe he was famous. No.
いいから。こういうことはお兄さんに任せておくものです。
The softness of his voice enveloped me in a great calm, and I sat back down to let him proceed. But I hope he'd be okay. Takeda was massive, and his short temper seemed like a recipe for disaster if anyone crossed him. I can't imagine dealing with such a violent soul.
すみません。ちょっといいですか？ あなた、新選組の方ですね。
Takeda turned to face this man, staring in disbelief that someone would approach him in such a manner.
だとしたらどうだというのだ。
そちらの主人は尊上過激派を出入りさせてないと言っているようです。一体何の疑いでこの方を連れて行くつもりなんでしょうか。
なんだ、私の邪魔をするとは貴様、この店に出入りする不逞老師の一人か。
The mysterious samurai smiled coolly, and he responded calmly.
邪魔をしたら不逞老師とは取り調べも何もあったものじゃないですね。
我々のタイムを妨害しているのだから証拠としては十分だ。
わかりました。ここだと他の人たちに迷惑がかかりますから外に出ませんか。
不逞の輩な。ようやく己の立場が分かったようだな。
Takeda huffed smugly to himself and waddled out of the store to challenge the samurai. Takeda's smirk remained on his face as the two met each other outside of the store. He assumed an offensive stance and then reached for his katana to threaten him. Or not. As soon as Takeda moved his hand to unsheath, the samurai intercepted to cover the sword's mouth.
離せ、離さぬと。
まさか本気で刀を抜くつもりじゃないですよね。もし抜けば僕も見て見ぬふりができなくなってしまいます。そうならないようにしたいのですけど。
The samurai possessed a duality. One side was a soft-spoken gentleman, the other side a warrior. Takeda sensed this duality as well, because after the samurai made his claim, he made no movement. Before we knew it, people gathered around the store, murmuring amongst themselves and echoing the general sentiment of confusion and wonder. The Mibu wolves are having a duel? Are they causing trouble again? Such murmurs caught my ear as I looked ahead.
人が集まってきているようですよ。本当に抜くつもりですか？
The samurai seemed to already know the answer. Takeda began to grit his teeth angrily, and he gruffly shook off the samurai's hand.
貴様の顔、忘れはせんぞ。覚えておけ。
His face was flushed with red, and he swiftly exited and disappeared from the store. As the tensions deflated, I exhaled in relief that things didn't come to violence. I'm glad that's over.
とんだ災難でしたね。さあ、中に戻りましょうか。
Were you okay? Are you okay? Were you okay or are you okay?
はい、あのくらい平気です。
I'm so glad. Why were you willing to risk your life against that man? You didn't have to stop me back there. The samurai slightly paused, then answered timidly.
あなたが知っていた顔によく似ていたからです。
I was perplexed. Me?
はい。やっぱり似ています。
He studied my face carefully, his eyes dotting up and down my small face. Although I liked the attention, I still had no clue who this person was or where he was from. I'm sorry. I think you've mistaken me for someone else. I bowed lightly to him, and he looked a little taken aback.
いいえ、いいですよ。ただの勘違いだったみたいですね。とりあえず中に入りましょう。せっかくのお茶やお菓子が台無しになってしまったし。
The samurai's kind demeanor was nearly impossible to resist, drawing me to return to the store as if I'd caught the scent of the city's sweetest bun. Upon entering, the tea shop owner smiled and brought us freshly brewed tea.
もしかしてわざわざ入れ直してくれたんですか？しかも羊羹まで。
Sitting beside our tea was a neatly arranged platter of sweet bean jelly. Man, I should have bought some the other day. Fa.
はい、ありがとうございました。本当に助かりました。
お礼を言われるほどのことじゃないですけど。でもありがとうございます。僕甘いもの大好きなんです。
それはよかった。存分に召し上がってください。それではごゆっくり。
The owner seemed to bow after every sentence and then returned to tend to his counter.
得しちゃいましたね。羊羹よかったら半分どうぞ。
Oh, no. I think the owner means for you to eat all of this.
そうですね。では僕がいただいてしまいますね。
He cut the sweet bean jelly into elegantly sliced halves, and he expressed delight after each bite. In my experience so far, Samurai didn't ever seem to smile often, but every time he took a bite, he grinned like a child, smiling as if he was the happiest person alive. It wouldn't be too much of a stretch, maybe, to guess that he and I were close in age. As this thought came to mind, I could still hear customers murmuring, whispering amongst themselves and to each other.
あのお侍さんが身風呂を追い払ってくれたんだって。
そうらしいわ。武士の中にも意外といい人がいるものなのね。
しかし役者みたいな美なんだな。その上腕も立つなんて。
The samurai seemed to overhear the discussion, timidly retreating from his initial enthusiasm. As soon as he finished drinking his tea,
すみません。僕の分のお勘定はここに置いておきます。
he rushed to get up, but not before slipping me some last words.
それでは僕はここで失礼します。もう無茶なことはしないようにしてくださいね。
The samurai fled the store, almost like a dream whispering around one's mind after awaking. He almost gave me no opportunity to thank him properly for earlier. I rushed after the samurai. Wait! I chased after him, yelling to catch his attention.
どうかしましたか？
Thank you so much for earlier. You saved me.
別にお礼を言われるほどのことはしていませんよ。
He turned away from me, stopping to gaze at the clouds swirling above us.
でも新選組は随分評判が悪いみたいですね。さっきのようなことをしてたら仕方がないのかもしれないけど。
Well, what should I say? We are explaining the situation. It's not as if I know the men of the Shinsengumi better than anyone else. I don't think all of the Shinsengumi men would ever behave like that. I need to read. I don't think all of the Shinsengumi men would ever behave like that other man did. He was just plain cruel. I'm sure you understand better than anyone, but out of all of the warriors in the city, there are bound to be the rotten eggs in the bunch.
知ってます。 僕もあの人が新選組を代表してるとは思ってないですから。
There was a pause in our conversation, and the wind whistled softly in the background. The samurai didn't break his concentration, staring intently into my face. His eyes seemed to be searching for something, perhaps a faint glimmer of a long-lost memory. If only he could tell me what seemed to be on the tip of his tongue, but he shut his eyes and turned.
それでは僕はそろそろ行きますね。
Sorry for stopping you.
気にしないでください。会えて嬉しかったよ。
Huh? How did he know my name? Who was this man? The samurai turned his back to me and departed. He wasn't familiar to me. Was I to him? I didn't have much time to consider what any of this meant because Hijikata-san returned shortly after.
少し待たせちまったな。どうだ、コードさんの情報は何かあったか。
Hijikata-san. I quietly shook my head in response.
そうか。まあ、そう簡単に足取りがつかめるわけはねえ。気にするな。
As we walked back towards the headquarters, I filled Hijikata-san in on the earlier proceedings.
武田がそんな真似を？
Again, he is the only man that could tolerate Takeda. But his actions, Somehow he was able to contain a palpable rage without lashing out at me.
今日見たことは誰にも話すな。お前の面倒を見ている幹部大使たちに。
His voice was stern, and I quietly nodded.
言わなくても分かってるとは思うが、事情を知らねえ大使には決して気を許すんじゃねえぞ。新選組も一枚岩じゃねえ。特に武田の野郎はお前の事情を知らされていねえか。
I understand. Once Hijikata-san was convinced of my understanding, he probed more questions.
で、お前を助けてくれたその侍っつうのはどこの誰だったの？
Oh, I forgot to ask his name.
それじゃ例のしようもねえじゃねえか。
Well, shit, I probably should not tell him that he knows my name. I don't know, it all happened so fast.
まあいい。どこかで見かけたら今度こそ名前を聞いておけ。
He curtly muttered, then left me with his last thought.
親父さんのことは残念だった。斎藤か新八たちが何か手がかりをつかんでくれてるといい。
Hopefully. Ah, yes, I'd forgotten that I accomplished nothing I wanted to today. Rush back to the base. Once back at headquarters, we discovered the sightings of my father I almost said Takeda! Terada Inn was false, crushing the sliver of happiness I held on to. Any water? Alright. No news of my father came forth the other day, and somber restlessness took hold of me. Originally, it seemed Hijikata-san granted me approval to accompany the captains on their rounds through Kyoto to search for my dad. Then he called me in. Ah. Right. Sumimasen. we are just gonna skip till we get to our
でもどさくさ危険をそれに
確かにそういう市中を巡察する組長行くか。
So we're remaining in the compound. After contemplating, I decided to stay in. I couldn't convince myself that I wouldn't be a burden to them during dangerous situations. Still, it was disheartening to think about. Another dull day spent inside. Throughout the past 6 months, I was allowed to finally search for my father on the rounds, and I felt like a part of the house. By contributing. Even though sometimes I was occupied with cleaning or cooking, it seemed like I was serving my part of the Shinsengumi in a meaningful way. I spent most of my time with the captains, but there were many opportunities to chat with the warriors and come to know them as real people. Maybe they were starting to think of me as a warrior in training rather than Hijikata-san's page. These worrying thoughts made me so anxious, I was turning numb. The idea that I had become so dependent on the Shinsengumi at this moment. What should I do today? I was resigned to the consequences of my decision, something that felt like I was wasting away the tender moments of my life in these headquarters. I was, in short, with nothing to do. Alright. I decided to enter the inner courtyard, where maybe I could feel a pleasant breeze tingle my face in the shade. The quaintness may calm me down. Damn it. Alas, no winds blew through the courtyard today. No reprieve from the harsh sun bearing down upon this dry emptiness. I had a feeling it was going to be a bad day. Shade was the best I could hope for, it seemed. I sighed, sitting in whatever shade I could find. Something occurred to me as the sun roasted Kyoto. Oh, right. My father's been here, hasn't he? They mentioned it, but they hadn't told me why. He was tending to the injured. Was he tending to the injured? Or perhaps educating the Shinsengumi on how to avoid illness? Maybe he'd intended to stay here long term. My father never mentioned to have been with the Shinsengumi. He'd visited only a few times, or so I have been told. If he'd really been their doctor, then he would have visited far more often, which left me with the question, why? It was extremely clear to me that the Shinsengumi had plenty of secrets, but I grew suspicious that these secrets deeply implicated my father as well. No, that can't be right, can it? I shook my head again, trying my best to dispel the dark thoughts taking place.
何がまさかなんですか?
I spun around to find that Sanan-san had walked behind me, utterly undetected and unannounced. Oh, Sanan-san! Is it alright for you to be walking around?
私が寝たきりの病人か何かのような言い方はよしてください。何の問題もありませんよ。
There was a hint of coldness to his words.
もっとも左腕は寝たきりですがね。
I couldn't bear to look at the sad, twisted smile he gave me. His arm hadn't healed, and it seemed certain now that it would never. The rest of the captains seemed sure that he would never be able to use his arm, as he'd done before.
君こそ部屋を出ていていいんですか? 豚舎内を勝手に動き回られては困ります。
Yes, I know. I'm sorry. They usually let me walk around as I pleased, so long as I didn't go into anyone's room, but I knew that technically I was confined to my room. Any freedom given to me was simply a courtesy. In other words, Sanan-san was right. If he decided to chastise me for being in the courtyard, I had no reasonable response. There were some things I wanted to think about. I hoped the courtyard would be breezy. The moment the words were out of my mouth, I realized it sounded far more like childish excuses than a valid explanation.
我々の監視から逃れて一人とは何か企んでいることでもあるみたいですよ。
I'm sorry. Still, I was beginning to grow accustomed to the subtle cruelty that seemed to accompany each word from Sanan-san's mouth. Alright, I'm going back to my room then. I turned and began to walk away. Sanan-san's unpleasantness had started after he was wounded during his trip to Osaka. He spent most of his time locked in his room now, and he was quick to lash out on others in response. I knew the loss of his arm hurt him more than I could understand, but I wish he could go back to being the warm, kind man he was originally. I turned around to see him still standing there. It's really hot out today. You should try and stay out of the sun. Please, take care of yourself. I gave him a nervous little laugh, and he responded with a chuckle of his own. His smile didn't look forced.
ありがとうございます。君も体調には気をつけてくださいね。
Hi! The Sanan-san-eyed first man was still there. My spirits lifted. I ran back to my room. It was later that evening that the compound exploded with activity. And exploded it did. I was walking down the hall when I heard footsteps and turned to see Nagakura coming towards me. Nagakura? What's that for? He glanced down almost absently at his hands, holding a candle and an exceptionally long needle.
長州の患者を捕まえたんだけどよ。なかなか口を割らねえらしいんだ。
Oh, jeez.
土方さんが直々に相手をすることになったんだが、道具が足りないって言うから持ってくところよ。
I don't understand.
こういうことは分からねえ方が幸せだって。
I can think of it. He gave another bark of laughter, turned his back on me, and walked off. Bye. Nagakura, bye. As the sun began to set, the activity in the compound reached a fever pitch. It was so busy that I couldn't even help with making dinner. The commotion was overwhelming. Heisuke! He shot past my door, then wheeled back around. What happened? All the men are running around. Any word from that Choshu prisoner?
ああ、あいつがようやく口を割ってさ。今夜長州の奴らが会合するらしいんだ。で、俺らは討ち入り準備中ってわけ。
Oh. Heisuke went on to explain that the Shinsengumi would be splitting into two groups and searching locations at opposite ends of the city. Kondo-san would take 10 men to the Ikeda Inn, and Hijikata-san would take 24 to the Shikoku Inn. We really don't see Shikoku that much.
土方さんたちの行く四国屋が当たりっぽいよ。俺は逆方向だから、ちょっと残念だな。
They sent more men with Hijikata because they thought he'd be seeing action. Kondo-san and his men were to make sure they covered all their bases. You mean there aren't even 40 men ready?
まあ、肝心な時に暑さで腹を壊す奴らが多くて困ってるんだよ。
I'd known that the heat in close quarters made some men sick, but I hadn't known it was so many. Heisuke sighed.
や諸次第にも連絡入れたんだけど、動いてくれる気配がないんだよな。
Sounds like you've got your work cut out for you. Unfortunately, there wasn't much I could offer him apart from sympathy. I had a feeling it was going to be a difficult night. After all the men capable of fighting had left for their respective assignments, Sanan-san called for me.
もちろん名目上のことですが、私は局長から屯所の守護を仕切るよう仰せつかりました。
Sanan-san's passive-aggressive attitude reared its head.
手薄になった新選組の屯所が何者かに狙われないとも限りません。君は私の目が届く範囲にいてください。非常時には適宜私から指示を出します。
Hi. I hesitated a moment, then spoke. Does that mean you'll protect me? I wasn't sure why, but he laughed at that.
腹痛で寝込んでいる大使よりは私の方がまだ使い物になりますから。
Was I supposed to be happy? His smile was so sad, I wasn't sure what to say. It seemed to hurt him most when the other men were out fighting, and all he could do was wait. The silence between us stretched out until the door to our room suddenly opened without a sound.
サンナー総長、奴らの会合場所が池田屋と判明いたしました。
The Ikeda Inn?
それは困りましたね。新選組は意外と賭け事に弱いのかもしれません。
His tone was light, but his face was serious, and with good reason. They'd been certain Shikoku was the right location, and I'd only sent half as many men to Ikeda.
山崎君、一つ面倒を頼まれてくれますか。
The man who he'd call Yamazaki nodded curtly. He is a Shinsengumi officer and spy, as well as a member of the Watch. Despite not living in the Yagi residence, he is aware of my situation.
まず、敵の所在は池田屋であると四国屋へ向かった土方君に伝えてください。そして、大変お手数なのですが、その伝令にはその子も同行させてほしい。
Wait. Yamazaki seemed just as surprised. I paused before thinking about what's next. Why me? Why me? I feel like if I were to go with him, I would only be a burden. Why did he choose me? I can't stand the thought of getting in someone's way and being the reason something bad happens.
足手まといといえども、人数には変わりませんよ。
Sanan-san's responded while giving me a cold gaze.
伝令に向かう途中、他の老師に足止めされるかもしれません。それ以外にも長州側の遠兵が存在する可能性もあります。もし伝令の道中に敵と遭遇したのなら、土方君との合流も遅れてしまうでしょう。
Sanan-san finished with the soft smile I hadn't seen him use. Sanan-san finished with the soft smile I hadn't seen him use for weeks.
さて、私の言いたいことはわかりますか？
はい。自分が長州遠兵の足止めを行い、最悪は彼女だけでも土方隊に合流させようと。
What? It sounded as if they were suggesting if things went badly, Yamazaki would sacrifice himself. I mean, it's Yamazaki!
もちろん山崎君が失敗するとは思っていませんよ。我々には人手が足りず、君には仕事が多い。会津藩や諸次第への連絡も担ってもらわねばなりませんから。
That would have Yamazaki running all across Kyoto. I suppose it really drove home just how thin the Shinsengumi were stretched. And there's no other person that could do this job? What about Shimada? Shimada is another Shinsengumi spy who is trusted enough with knowledge of my situation. Sanan-san shook his head. The Shinsengumi needed every single member they can get, and Shimada was with the Shikoku team. Which means that, apart from Yamazaki, I was the only one that could possibly serve as a messenger at the time.
確か雪村君だったな。護身程度の術なら身につけていると聞いたが。
I do.
残念ながら君の安全は保証できない。それで構わないというのであれば、俺に同行してくれ。
If I tried to run away while we were out, I had no doubt that he would kill me without hesitation. This mission is his priority, not my life. Even so, I'll go. I can take care of myself. You don't need to worry about me. Sanan-san gave me a small smile. I knew he wanted to join the battle more than anyone, but we both knew that wasn't possible. The least I could do was carry out my mission.
では、早朝命令、しかと受けたまわりました。
He bowed then as he stepped out of the room and turned to me.
全力で俺についてこい。
I took off after him, my legs working as hard as they could. Into the dark streets we ran. I discovered quickly that half a year indoors did little for my physique, and I was out of shape. After only a few blocks, I was gasping for breath. Yamazaki, who was running ahead of me, suddenly stopped and looked sharply behind us.
何があってもこの通りを走り抜けろ。後ろを振り向く必要はない。
Don't tell me someone's behind us.
君は知らなくてもいい。
Seems like Yamazaki's hunch was right. What should I tell Yamazaki? Yamazaki, you should go. Yamazaki, you should... Yeah, that's the answer. I'll stay behind. Yamazaki, please, you should go.
バカなことを言うな。君がここに残って何ができる？
If I distract the enemies, then you could go in the meantime.
引きつける役ならば俺がやる。君は走れ。
Yamazaki wasn't looking to take no for an answer, so I nodded in good faith. I looked to what lay ahead of me. As I stepped into the next intersection, I saw a flash of metal from the corner of my eye.
君は惑うな。じきに合流できる。白の大福を目指してこのまま走れ。
Ah! I kept running. I pretended I didn't hear the sounds of swords ringing against one another behind me and ran. My knees felt weak and my legs shook, but I kept going. They'd have to collapse or tear themselves to pieces before I'd stop. Even so, I felt so slow. I wanted to cry out, to scream at my body to go faster, faster! Ah! A bright light suddenly cut through the darkness, and I placed my hand over my eyes from the glare. My heart stopped. Was it Joshu's soldiers? I froze.
何やってんだてめえは。
I very nearly began to cry with relief. Hijikata-san was not dressed in the usual light blue jacket, but rather a bright white uniform to be seen in dimly lit places. Instead, I simply collapsed as Harada reached out to grab me.
大丈夫か？勝手に豚書から出てると土方さんに怒られるぞ。
I grabbed a hold of Harada's hand and pulled my body to its feet. I wanted to tell him I had permission to leave and explain it was all right for me to be there, but I was so winded that I could barely speak. Besides, I wasn't sent to Hijikata-san to make excuses. I took as deep of a breath as my shuddering lungs could manage before speaking. The meeting Arikida! Suddenly, Hijikata's expression changed.
本命はあっちか。
I nodded rapidly.
敵の会合場所は池田屋であると。
Hijikata gestured towards me.
三男さんなら脱走を見過ごさねえ。つまりこいつは早朝命令で屯所を出たってことだ。
I like this line and I don't know why. Sana lost his arm, not his brain.
よく俺らと合流できたな。今日の地理には詳しくないんだ。
Yamazaki. I finally got some of my breath back and I did my best to tell them what had happened.
合図や諸次第はどうなった？もう池田屋に行ってるのか？
I just shook my head. Hijikata thought for a moment, then spoke.
斉藤と原田は隊を率いて池田屋へ向かえ。俺はよそで別件を処理しておく。
Harada and Saito nodded curtly and then turned to their businesses.
あんたもこれ以上の単独行動は危険だ。俺たちか副長かどちらかに同行しろ。
I still lacked the breath to respond properly, so I simply nodded. We both knew they couldn't leave me here. But whom should I accompany? We're staying with Hijikata. The prospect of being alone with him was rather frightening, but for reasons I still don't understand, I decided to go with Hijikata-san. We were quiet for a while. I felt like I should say something, but I wasn't sure what. Instead, I kept quiet. After a moment, he glanced down at me.
伝令ご苦労だったな。俺たちが先手を打てるのはお前の手柄だ。
I never thought Hijikata-san of all people would praise me for anything. My heart fluttered momentarily in my chest. But what did he mean by an advantage? If the battle at Ikeda-in had begun, it didn't seem like we had much of an advantage at all. We stepped from the alley into the central avenue. Hijikata-san, why are we out here on the street?
臆病風吹かすような連中は目立つことしか頭にねえって相場が決まってるんだよ。
I blinked, not sure what to make of that. Yamazaki appeared beside us without making a sound. Yamazaki, you're safe! He didn't seem to have been hurt at all. Thank goodness. Yamazaki's eyes slid to me for a moment, then back to Hijikata-san.
池田屋の件はすでにお聞き及びかと思います。自分は会津藩と諸次第へも通達を行うよう三男総長より促されておりましたが。
だろうな。次の指示は追って出す。山崎はひとまず俺と一緒に来い。
承知。
腰の表役人どもへは新選組の副長が直々に挨拶しに行く。
Deep in his cold eyes, I saw a spark of anger. Oh, shit. They appeared as the words came out of his mouth. Lines of government soldiers marching towards us. There were hundreds of them marching across the entire width of the street, several rows deep. Now I understand why Hijikata-san took us out into the street. We would never have seen the government forces as we shimmied through the back alleys. There was something about their march, so slow and unconcerned, that lit the fires of anger in my eyes. The rest of the men are still fighting at the inn. The Shinsengumi had a few soldiers able to fight, but they were risking their lives for Kyoto. Didn't these men have the same responsibility? Why weren't they rushing to help us at the inn? Perhaps my anger was more obvious than I realized, because Hijikata-san gave a snort of laughter. Man is laughing at my anger and being mad. I guess he finds it cute.
安心しろ。新選組 奴らのいいようにはさせね
He stepped forward into the very middle of the street, directly in front of the advancing soldiers. All he did was move a few feet and turn to face them, but he held such authority in his movements. He could have easily been at the head of an army.
局長以下我ら新選組一同池田屋にて御用改めの最中である一切の手出しは無用池田屋には立ち入らないでもらおうか
Even I could see that the government men were going to protest Hijikata-san's proclamation when Yamazaki leaned over to whisper in my ear.
もし池田屋に立ち入ることを許せば長州浪士制圧すら彼らの手柄とされるだろう
What? How could they? After all the Shinsengumi had done, it just didn't seem fair. But it's the men of the Shinsengumi who are risking their lives.
それだけ我ら新選組は軽んじられているということだ副長は今たった一人で新選組のために体を張っておられる彼らが池田屋に踏み込むことを許せばその突入したことだけを喧伝するだろう実際に突入した新選組の武勇はなかったことにされかねないだからこそ副長は会津藩の介入を封じようとしてくれているのだ
Yamazaki held Hijikata-san in such high regard. So when Hijikata-san said we have an advantage, this is what he was referring to.
しかし我々にも務めが小せえ旅館に何十人も入るわけねえだろう池田屋を取り囲むくらいが関の山だそれとも乱戦に巻き込まれて死にてえというなら止めはしねえが我が身が可愛いならおとなしくしとくんだ
Hijikata-san's tone, as much as his words, left no room for argument. Until the battle ended, he stood his ground, and not a single man challenged him. Finally, the sun rose from the black sky. The raid itself had only lasted 2 hours. But for me, at least, it had felt far longer. There had been 20 Imperial nationalists at the Ikeda Inn. The Shinsengumi had killed 7 Ronin and injured 4 more. I learned later that with the help of the Aizu Domain and the Kyoto Judiciary Commissioner, they arrested 23 people. The owner of the Ikeda Inn had also been arrested for trying to help the Choshu rebels escape. The Shinsengumi had won an incredible victory, fighting against superior numbers in enemy territory, but they paid dearly for it. Okita had taken a blow to the chest and lost consciousness. Heisuke had been cut on the forehead, and the bleeding refused to stop. Nakakura had injured his left hand. One of the Shinsengumi soldiers lost his life at the inn's rear entrance, and 2 others were severely injured there as well. It didn't seem likely like they would survive. The Kyoto Military and Judiciary Commissioner also fought the Choshu Ronin. With their successful resolution of the Battle of Ikeda Inn, the Shinsengumi had at last made a name for themselves. It looked as though the peace in Kyoto had been protected. Never could I have imagined what the ultimate result of their victory would be. Guess what we get to do? We get to do some skipsy doodles again. Oh wait, I'm not gonna skip this, but I think I know what this is. End of July 1864. Weeks passed since the Battle of the Ikeda Inn. In the meantime, the Shinsengumi grew stricter during their rounds to arrest the numerous outlaw Ronins that escaped from the Ikeda Inn. Rumors surfaced of extremists who were plotting to exact revenge on the Shinsengumi. Additionally, there were also problems occurring with warriors spanning from other domains, making things tense around the headquarters. Things were finally settling down. Yep, there it is. As a result of my efforts during the battle, they grew more encouraging of my involvement. The Shinsengumi allowed me to sweep the area in front of the headquarters on my own. One day, I was cleaning the courtyard with a broom when I heard a gentle footsteps approach me.
すみません。こちらが新選組の屯所ですか?
Oh, yes. The voice came from behind me, so I was caught off guard when answering. Didn't I meet you the other day?
こんにちは。お茶屋さん以来ですね。
I met him on the first day I was allowed to leave the Shinsengumi compound. This was the mysterious samurai that helped me while I awaited Hijikata-san's return at the tea shop. Why, yes. I appreciated your help the other day.
いいえ、大したことではありませんでしたから。それより、元気そうで何よりです。
Now that I remember it, this man called me by my name when I encountered him. But I never learned his name. I remember Hijikata-san scolded me for not knowing his name, so I brought up the question. I'm sorry for never asking your name despite you saving me. If it's alright, is it alright if I get your name? His eyes twinkled kindly before he spoke, and I sensed a faint melancholy in his voice.
僕は伊庭八郎です。
Ah, Hachiro Iba. Iba Hachiro. What a pretty name. I'd have to tell Hijikata-san later. So, how may I help you today, Iba?
ええ、実は。
Iba kept stealing a glance towards the base. I assumed his business was with the Shinsengumi. When I first met him, Iba defended a tea shop keeper from Takeda. In this encounter, Takeda proudly declared himself as a warrior of the Shinsengumi. I slightly suspected Iba intended to visit and inform the leaders about the incident. Hijikata showed up suddenly, as if he telepathically knew I was speaking to someone. Oh, Hijikata-san, this man is... Before I could finish my sentence, the man went towards Hijikata-san.
あ、やっぱりトシさん、八郎です。お久しぶりです。
おめえは八郎か。なんだってこんなところにいるんだ。
When Hijikata-san realized who it was, his eyes grew wide.
驚きました。幕命で教視察に来てるんです。それより新選組って本当にトシさんたちのことだったんですね。この目で見るまでは信じられなかったけど、おめでとうございます。本当に侍になれたんですね。
おい、冷やかすなよ。まだ扱いは浪人と同じなんだからよ。
でも侍になりたいって夢が叶ったじゃないですか。
冷やかすなって言ってんだろ。
いいえ、江戸じゃ泣く子も黙る新選組といったらとても有名なんですよ。それに池田屋の話も聞いています。皆さんとてもご活躍だったみたいですね。
ま、ぼちぼちってところだ。
How very unlike himself. Hijikata-san seemed to be flustered and his cheeks were rosy. The report suggested they've known each other for some time. Were they good friends? I still needed to tell Hijikata-san that Iba was the samurai who came to my aid at the tea shop. Once I verified the conversation had come to a halt, I mustered the courage to speak to Hijikata-san. Hijikata-san, this was the young gentleman who helped me from Takeda the other day at the tea house. Hijikata-san furrowed his eyebrows.
ほう、そうだったのか。こいつが迷惑をかけたっていうか、余計なもんを見せちまったようだ。
たまたま通りがかっただけです。それに私事中でしたから、どこにも報告はしていません。
そいつはすまねえな。まあ立ち話もなんだ。中に入ってくれ。
Hijikata looked uncomfortable offering anyone any sort of kindness, but he looked at Iba warmly. Is the rest of this scene the same? I took tea to the two in the hall. Hijikata-san told me to remain there, so I decided to listen in because, again, we can't do anything else.
今日に来たのは幕命って言っていたな。何の仕事で来たんだ。
今は奥詰め役を務めています。
An okuzume? I listened intently but subtly, since I was unfamiliar with the contents of their conversation.
こいつは幕府直参の旗本で、奥詰めっていうのは将軍の身辺を守る奴らのことだ。
Oh, wow. I'm honored to meet such a man.
いえいえ、そんなことありません。父の仕事の縁でたまたまなんです。
But what would bring a man of his stature here, Hijikata-san? This meant Iba was someone who worked directly with the shogun. What an honor. It made no sense why he would interact with the Shinsengumi or why he had business with us.
お前の考えてることはわかるぜ。なんで俺と知り合いかってことだろう。
I did my best to nod without offending him.
こいつはな、旗本であると同時に江戸じゃ4本指に入る道場の一つ、新行東流伊庭道場の跡取り息子だ。その伊庭道場と俺たちがいた道場とはそこそこ交流があってな。その縁だ。
ええ、そうなんです。だからトシさんたちがいる今日に来ることになって、とても楽しみにしていたんです。
Iba's eyes shined with adoration, but Hijikata-san scoffed and rolled his eyes. I think I'm safe to skip forward.
勝手に喜んでる。
はい。もしかして彼女
That's the same.
わかってる。こいつはちょいと分け新。
わかりました。
こいつの親父が行方不明でな。捜査に協力してもらっている。
行方不明って、もしかして雪村光道さんがですか？
How did he know everything? When he mentioned my father's name, the hairs on my neck stood up. How do you know my father's name? I guess Hijikata-san was also shocked by his knowledge, and he looked dubiously towards Iba. Alright, this changed. This is a change.
ちょっと待て。なんでこいつの親父が光道さんだって分かったんだ。
それはすごい昔のことですが、雪村診療所に行ったことがあるんです。僕のこと覚えていませんか？
Iba asked timidly, and it finally clicked for me. If Iba had visited my father's clinic, then that explains why he would have known my name and my father. No matter how hard I tried, however, I couldn't recall his face or name from memory. Were you a patient? Were you a patient of my father? Iba looked a little forlorn by my response.
いいえ、幼い頃蘭学に興味があって尋ねたことがあったんです。
そっか。
でも今度はこっちを訪ねるようにしますから。
はあ？何言ってやがる。お前は来なくていい。
That's a response.
そう言わないでくださいよ。 同じ江戸出身のよしみじゃないですか。
Iwa drew Hijikata in closer in a jovial manner, and Hijikata blushed at the notion. Hijikata is normally really uptight, so seeing him behave this way was startling. I had a lingering suspicion that Hijikata was actually enjoying himself. And here comes the others.
おいおい、
聞いたことがある。
新八さん。
そうか。
Yeah, we can skip. We can skip. We can skip.
上限。
じゃあ、
あいつは旗本で何が気に入ったのか知らん。まあちょっとしたか。
Alright. Before we knew it, evening had come, and Iba told us it was time for him to depart.
では江戸に戻ったら高堂さんのことを聞いてみます。
言っておくが、その件は内密にしてくれ。
わかりました。誰にも口外しません。
As we exchanged goodbyes, the warriors returned from their afternoon rounds. One of them seemed to take notice of us, and he rushed over while shouting.
お前はあの時の何をしにここに来た。
God fucking damn it, it's Takeda! I can't wait till we get to his fucking part, but it's not this route. It was Takeda, glaring at Iba angrily and demanding answers.
何を言ってるかわかりませんが、あなたとは初めてお会いすると思います。
私を愚弄するつもりか。貴様、名を名乗れ。
僕は幕府直参旗本大番士奥詰役伊庭八郎と申します。
幕府直参奥詰伊庭、あの伊庭道場。
はい。今日に所用があって参りましたので、旧知である司令官の皆さんへ挨拶に寄ったところです。
挨拶などと嘘をつくな。先日のことを告げに来たのだろう。
あくまで挨拶に来ただけです。それとも先日のこととやらを思い出した方がいいでしょうか。
Iba's eyes sharpened directly at Takeda, and the latter stopped his pacing and deepened his voice.
それはあなたがそう言うならそれでいいでしょう。私は失礼する。
Takeda seemingly snapped into shape, speaking with a semblance of respect before storming off. Iba seemed relaxed despite everything. Everyone suddenly stood still, and I was afraid of another incident, so I sighed once Takeda left.
トシさん、今の方は
5番組組長の武田官流さ。先日の茶屋の話は雪村から聞いてる。悪かったな。お前に迷惑はかけねえよ。
僕は大丈夫ですが、この子の方を気にかけてあげてください。一緒にいたのがバレたら大変そうです。
ああ、わかった。
それじゃあまた会いに来ますね。
Ah. Did he mean he's coming to see me? Did he just mean he was visiting the headquarters? I couldn't respond since I was unsure, and Iba smiled to me with his twinkling eyes. His face seemed reluctant, if not a little forlorn, and he left the compound. I stared at him as he walked into the distance, until his small figure was removed from my eyes. Iba was a mysterious person. Even if he was someone very important and upper class, he acted with integrity and kindness, commanding a lot of respect from the captains of the Shinsengumi. I did not think there was a samurai like him in the shogunate. It's August. I can skip over this because this is the question of, do you want to go with us? We're with Harada. Yeah, we're with Harada. We can skip over this. We have seen this too many times.
超さ超
I want to come. We're going. And we're gonna skippity skip some more.
すま
あり
君いいの
合図ついに
Damn the sound effect.
発射場
We're skipping. We're skipping a lot actually because this is just all the same.
そうけ
よ
今度
君さん彼女
Saito finding the loophole. Okita being Okita. Now we're gonna go and we're gonna skip more. Listen, this is just where we're going through this game. If we're going to do several fucking routes, we're going to come across several scenes that are the same. We're stuck with them. I'm so sorry.
どうやら合図
休む
We'll keep going. We're waking up by cannons. Yep.
ま
Shishika telling people to fucking move. And we gotta get through the
Yeah.
choices thing.
3
Do, 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 do.
それ手間焦点つい
なる
現
あい
残りお前は
And we're going to Mount Tenno. That's where we're headed. Whoa. Whoops. I didn't mean to do that. There was no question I would go with Hijikata-san and chase after Ronin heading for Mount Tenno. Despite Fushimi being quite a distance away, soldiers moved at a rapid pace. It was hard for me to keep up, and I was beginning to run short of breath when I saw someone. Oh look, it's the bitch. He was standing in front of us, shadows obscuring his face and clothes, cloaked in a strange aura. Hijikata seemed to sense it too, and he mentioned for the men to halt. The Shinsengumi stopped, save for one man, who was either too excited or too foolish to heed the commander. I saw a momentary flash of steel as the man yelped.
てめえふざけんなよおい大丈夫か
The man just laid there, unresponsive. I could see thick red blood already beginning to pool around him. Taken aback at first by the sudden attack, the men all turned now to glare at the stranger.
だんだらもその羽織新選組だな忠臣蔵の真似事と相変わらず野暮な風景をして
They were already on edge, but the man's words only made the men more agitated. What? Water bottle, stay still, please. I'd heard from the men that they had their reasons for wearing their uniforms. They wanted desperately to pay the strange man back for his taunts and for attacking their brother, but they knew now was no time for revenge.
あの夜も池田屋に乗り込んできたか
手柄探し田舎侍にはまだ餌が足りんと見える。貴様らは侍ですらなかった。ここで引き返せ。さもなくば今のもののように血へどを吐いて倒れることになる。
As he spoke, I felt the air begin to thicken with the rage of the Shinsengumi.
お前が池田屋で宗司を倒したやつか。大した凄腕らしいが、随分と安い挑発をするじゃないか。
Hichikata's smile was anything but warm.
腕だけは確かな百姓集団と聞いていた。このありさまを見るにそれも作り話なんだ。
He laughed at the sight of the man he'd just slain.
池田屋に来ていたあの男、起きたとか。あれも見客と呼ぶには非力な男。
Hijikata's son's teeth were now almost completely bared. I knew Akita wasn't weak at all, and I wanted to tell him so, but it was true that he had been injured.
掃除の悪口なら好きなだけ言えばいい。でもな、その前にこいつを殺したわけを言え。
I heard the soft hiss of Nagakura's sword sliding from its scabbard. At his feet lay the man who'd been attacked, his face now an odd pale color. I wept for his spirit.
そのわけが納得いかねえもんだったら、今すぐ俺がお前をぶった切ってやる。
貴様らが武士の誇りも知らず、手柄を得ることしか頭にない幕府の犬だから。敗北を知り戦場を去った連中を何のために追い立てようというのだ。腹を切る時間と場所を求め天王山を目指した長州侍の誇りを何故に理解できぬ。
What? Was he telling the truth? Did the Choshu men really commit honorable suicide? I looked over at Hichikata-san and the rest of the men, and not one of them looked surprised. The man in front of us was trying to stop the Shinsengumi in an attempt to protect the pride of the Choshu samurai, which is what had upset him. From his point of view, I could see why he felt right in what he was doing, but that gave him no right to kill someone just to prove a point. Is it really all right to take a man's life for the sake of someone else's pride? Only you can protect your own pride. Letting others control the value of something important to you will only hurt you later on. How can someone keep their pride if they expect someone else to fight for it?
面白いこと。ならば新選組が手柄を立てるためであれば、他人の誇りを犯してもよいというのか。
He did not sound amused. No, that's not really what I meant, but... Under that crimson glare, my voice trailed off.
偉そうに話し出すから何かと思えば、戦いをなめんじゃねえぞ、この甘ったれが。
The man spoke through clenched teeth, and the knuckles of his sword hand turned white.
身勝手な理由で喧嘩をふっかけたくせに、討ち死にする覚悟もなく尻尾を巻いた連中が、武士らしく綺麗に死ねるわけねえだろうが。罪人は斬首刑で十分だ。おのずから腹を切る名誉なんざ、御所に弓引いた逆賊には不要のもんだ。自ら戦いを仕掛けるからに、殺される覚悟も済ませておけと言いたい。死ぬ覚悟もなしに戦を始めたんだ。それこそ武士の風上にも置けねえな。奴らに武士の誇りがあるんだ。俺らも手を抜かねえのが最後の
Hijikata-san's own concept of pride and honor was not something he could easily compromise. No matter how long he and the stranger spoke, I also knew that they would never see eye to eye. Hijikata drew his sword from its scabbard, and I saw Nagakura drop into a fighting stance. Hijikata's eyes narrowed, and after muttering something angry under his breath, Nagakura stepped back and put his blade back in its sheath.
で、お前も覚悟はできてるんだろう。俺たちの仲間を切り殺したその覚悟。
口だけは達者らしい。まさか俺を殺せるとでも思っている。
In an instant, their swords met, and the clang of metal reverberated through the mid-afternoon air. They sprang up hard, eyes fixed on one another, and I saw Hijikata-san's hand tighten on his sword. The commander's swordsmanship seemed without a true rival, but this man had defeated Okita. I saw Nagakura reach for his own sword. He was to leap into the fight as well, probably hoping to help Hijikata-san gain the upper hand. Oops. When I saw him about to pounce, I couldn't help but scream. Stop, Nagakura. No, Nagakura, you can't! This fight wasn't why the Shinsengumi came here. Hijikata-san's troops' mission was to follow the Choshu rebels to Mount Tenno. There could be no doubt that the strange swordsman was an enemy, and a dangerous one. We might have needed our whole force to defeat him. Hijikata-san, however, would never let us abandon our mission out of fear of losing, especially after his speech. Nagakura could see this mysterious man was quite powerful, and after a few moments spent grinding his teeth, he took his hand off his sword.
土方さんよ、この部隊の指揮権限、今だけ俺が預かっておくぜ。
言うじゃねえか。任せたぜ、新八。
The commander's eyes followed the swordsman, and his mouth curled into a predatory grin.
よし、いいかお前ら。今から天王山目指して全力疾走再開だ。
The soldiers roared their assent.
貴様ら。
おい、よそ見してんじゃねえよ。真剣勝負って言葉の意味も知らねえのか。
Hijikata was in a fighting stance and put himself between the troops and the man to avoid escape.
邪魔をするな。
He swung his sword, and Hijikata-san received it and was thrown back.
くそ、なんてバカ力だ。
Since there was a distance between Hijikata and himself, the man turned towards Nagakura. Keep running! I desperately wanted to stop, but I forced my feet to keep going and made a break for it.
そうだ、それでいい。そのまま走れ。
In an instant, Hijikata-san closed his distance between himself and the man, positioning his sword.
実力もわからん。この幕府の犬が。
あいにくだな。戦場の実力なんざ気合でどうにでもなるもんだぜ。
I couldn't quite keep up, so I lagged for a moment. We'll be waiting for you at Mount Tenno! I couldn't leave him without saying something, so I yelled as loudly as I could out of support. Please, come back to us! His eyes narrowed sharply and he chuckled.
お前、俺が誰だか分かってんのか?
His voice was calm, confident, and cocksure. The Shinsengumi's commander! I nodded to him and jogged past, falling into step with Nagakura and the rest of the men. We ran straight for Mount Tenno and didn't look back. It's almost nighttime. I was waiting at the base of Mount Tenno. Nagakura led some men further up looking for the Choshu rebels, But a few were left at the bottom in case any other Choshu forces returned. I stayed with them.
大丈夫ですよ。そろそろ戻ってくると思います。
I know, but is Hijikata safe? He must be. No sooner were the words out of my mouth than a shadow appeared in the dirt road in front of me. Ah! The shadow stepped towards us and into the light. Hijikata-san! I felt tears spring to my eyes and shoved them away with the back of my hand.
ご無事でしたか、副長。怪我もないようで何よりです。
Shimada was right. Hijikata-san was without a scratch, and even so, his expression was dark.
せめて人たち浴びせたかったんだが、途中で薩摩藩の横槍が入りやがった。
薩摩藩の横槍ですか。
奴は風間千景とか言ってた。薩摩の手の者らしい。
But if he's part of the Satsuma domain, didn't they help the Aizu drive off the Choshu? Why did Kazuma try to stop the Shinsengumi? I frowned. Something wasn't right. Does that mean he disobeyed orders? Kazuma, I mean.
おそらくな。薩摩の連中も扱いかねているようだ。だいぶ迷惑してるようだが、風間には強く言えないらしい。
なるほど。その風間とやら、薩摩の中でも相当に優遇された立場があるのでしょう。
Maybe it's because he's powerful enough to hold off men like Okita and Hijikata-san. But there's something else to him that perplexes me. When Hijikata spoke next, his voice was bitter.
奴は特権の上にあぐらをかいてるだけの甘ったれだ。そんな奴に誇りだなんだと言われる筋合いはねえ。
Before Hijikata-san could continue, we heard the sound of men approaching, and Nagakura appeared with the bulk of our detachment trailing behind him. Nagakura stopped for a split second when he saw Hijikata-san, and then he creeped into a sly grin.
上に行って見てきたぜ。残念だが、長州の奴らは残らず切腹して果ててた。
My heart fell as he explained. I wasn't sad that they'd killed themselves or that the Shinsengumi hadn't been able to arrest them. Only that more lives have been lost. As he spoke, he flashed half a smile at Nagakura. No sneezing, goddammit. But why? Only a few hours before, he'd said that there were criminals. Only a few hours before, he'd said that they were criminals and only deserved to be beheaded. But now he applauded them for taking their own lives? My question came out instinctively, as if my heart spoke for me rather than my head. He shrugged.
わからねえみてえだな。確かに新選組としてはよくねえ。奴らに目的を果たさせちまったんだからな。だがな、潔さを潔しと肯定するのに敵も味方もねえんだよ。わかるか？
Oh, I suppose that makes some sense. It was obvious I didn't quite understand what he was trying to say. His expression softened a little.
お前ももう少し俺たちといればわかるようになるかもしれねえ。
Together, once again, we returned to the Imperial Estate to meet up with the rest of the Shinsengumi. On the way back, Hijikata-san and the man began to discuss their next move. It looked like there was still plenty for the Shinsengumi to do in Kyoto. The Choshu extremists' attempted attack on the imperial estate eventually came to be known as the Hamaguri Rebellion. Although the Shinsengumi were called to action, their efforts were stymied, and they found little in the way of glory. Communication with their superiors was poor at best, and they spent much of the battle waiting in the reserves. When the Shinsengumi finally entered the battle, each man found several strange opponents awaiting him. Shikage Kazuma, who defeated Okita at Ikeda, claimed to be from the Satsuma domain during his encounter with Hijikata-san. Kyujo Amagiri, the man who shattered Heisuke's head guard at Ikeda, also claimed membership in the Satsuma. They had also met Kyo Shiranui, who had fought alongside men from Choshu. Whoever they were, it was clear they were not allies of the Shinsengumi. Indeed, it seemed they could easily become some of its greatest enemies. If they were to meet in open battle, the casualties would be severe. I read sever. What? I brained. By the time the battle was over, the commanders of the Choshu attack had been killed in the fighting or took their own lives. There were some soldiers, however, who escaped, setting Kyoto ablaze as they fled. By some terrible misfortune, winds that day blew from the north and fanned the flames, reducing the southern end of the imperial estate to ash. As a result of the Choshu attack, many imperial nationalists were executed. With the Hamaguri rebellion over, the Choshu were branded as traitors for attacking the estate. From then on, they were acknowledged enemies of the court. (1864). September 1864. The closeness in time between the battles of the Ikeda Inn and the Imperial Palace created significant civil unrest within Kyoto. The Shinsengumi redoubled their efforts to keep people safe, but the more they worked, the more the shogun put them to work. His approval for their activities meant more official businesses, and it stretched them thin. Even with recruits from Kyoto and Osaka, it wasn't enough. After many discussions, the Shinsengumi chose to recruit even more men from Edo, and Heisuke was tasked with preliminary scouting in the city. The hardened sun kissed our burning cheeks as Kondo and I saw Heisuke off, his grin wide and his bags packed from the night before.
さて、じゃあ行ってくるとすっか。俺がいない間、みんなのことよろしくな。
I promise to help as much as I can.
大使募集の件、頼むぞ、ヘイスケ。俺も来月には江戸に行くからな。
The plan was for Heisuke to hit Edo early and scope the potential men, and have Kondo follow behind a month after to make the final say with recruits. Isn't there someone you mentioned wanting to see? I remember you saying something like that.
雪村君はまだ聞いていなかったか。確か名は伊藤さんと言ってたな。北進一刀流の剣客で学もある人らしい。
まあ正直言うと、伊藤さんとはそこまで親しいわけじゃないけどさ。多分話は聞いてくれると思う。
それで十分だ。伊藤さんは尊王派と聞いているが、義をもって話をすれば必ずや力を貸してくれるに違いない。
Kondo nodded confidently, but Heisuke looked like he wasn't quite as sure.
よし。それじゃあそろそろ行ってくる。コードさんのこともできるだけ調べとくから、期待して待っててくれよ。
Okay, be careful. I watched him go, and the smaller his back became, the lonelier I felt. When I couldn't see him anymore, my heart twinged. I glanced up at Kondo-san. You look happy. You're thinking about all the new warriors you're getting, right?
ああ、やはり大使が増えるのは嬉しいものだ。それが有能な人材ならなおさらだよ。
He puffed out his chest and grinned. His relief at recruiting new members reflected just how worried he must have been. I hadn't realized how much we were struggling. Wee! Kondo-san kept his men close to his heart, and now he could smile. Time passed quickly after Heisuke left, and a month soon went by. The day for Kondo-san to leave for Edo was upon us, and I saw him off the next morning. I came across Kondo in the yard, mired in his thoughts. Hello, Kondo-san.
ああ、雪村君か。どうかしたのかい？
Oh, no, nothing like that. I was just thinking about how you'll be on your way to Edo tomorrow.
ああ、その通りだ。平助をあまり待たせるわけにもいかんからな。
It will be a little lonely around here, once you've left headquarters too.
何？留守は都市に任せてあるし、いないと言ってもほんの一月程度だよ。
He didn't know his kind generosity and Heisuke's bright personality kept me going day after day here. They were the highlights of my restrictive life. But both of them gone. Kondo-san hadn't even left yet, and I was already feeling an uncontrollable loneliness sweep over me. Oh my god. It must have shown in my face because he suddenly looked troubled.
そうだ。せっかく江戸に行くわけだし、何か土産でも買ってこようじゃないか。君もふるさとが懐かしかろう。
No, I'm fine. You don't have to worry about me.
そうか。では他に俺にできることがあれば言ってくれ。できるだけ期待に沿おう。
He was always so accommodating to me already. I didn't have any complaints. But there was something I desired for a while, but never had the nerve to ask before. Before you leave for Edo, could you train me?
稽古？ひょっとして剣の稽古という意味かね？いや、それはいかんだろう。俺の指導は荒っぽいからな。怪我でもさせたら高堂さんに申し訳が立たん。しかし、ずいぶん唐突な頼みだが、何か理由でも。
His eyebrows furrowed in concern. I want to watch over everyone while you're gone. If I'm going to help watch over the compound while you're gone, I want to be capable.
いや、しかし、君は大使ではないし、刀を振るう機会などまずないとは思うな。
You're right, but still, I want to be strong enough to be able to protect myself. At least the bare minimum, if something were to happen. Having witnessed many battles with the Shinsengumi, it was pretty clear how far behind in skill I was. I would fall quickly if I dealt with similar battles. I knew I'd never be as strong as them, but war could still reach my doorstep someday, as well. I wanted to lessen the burden for my protectors. I tried my best to explain how I felt to Kondo-san, and eventually he gave a firm nod.
はい、わかった。そこまでの熱意を持っているなら、俺も喜んで稽古に付き合おう。
Dad is gonna teach us. We found a cord to tie up my sleeves and set about training me. Normal Shinsengumi training revolved around real-life sparring with wooden swords. Kondo-san decided to go easy with me with a bamboo stick.
では、早速始めるとしよう。先に言っておくが、天然理心流は少々荒っぽいぞ。
I'm ready.
ならば、まず構えから見ようか。雪村君は剣術を習っていたんだったな。
It was mostly for self-defense, but I did receive instruction in fighting with a kodachi.
ならば、身についた型を崩すことはない。その流派の型で構えてみてくれ。
Ah. Bamboo stick in hand, I moved into the familiar stance that I'd memorized during my training.
握りが甘い。
Like a whip, his harsh words stung as he barked.
いいか、正面から切り合いになった時、真っ先に間合いに入るのは刀であり、刀を持つ手でもある。握りが甘ければ、その時点で容易に刀を落とされてしまう。これは気をつけねばならん。
Hi! He hit me with the full brunt of his stringent teaching. I could see he was taking this seriously. It wasn't going easy on me because I was a girl.
今度は固く握りすぎているな。君の場合、腕力の問題で敵の斬撃を正面から受け止めるのは避けるべきだ。となると、自然斬撃を受け流す形になるが、この場合だと逆に固く握りすぎていては。
With Kondo-san's instruction, I practiced swinging the sword over and over, doing my best to learn and retain everything he was teaching me.
もうこんな時間か。
His words brought my head up and I blinked. The sun set without me realizing. Pulling below, and the sky was now shades of red and purple. Suddenly, in the real world again, fatigue slammed into me and I collapsed to my knees. Thank you for doing this for me. Every limb was shaking, my clothes completely drenched in sweat. I sucked in air like I couldn't get enough of it. Kondo-san glanced over at me when I fell onto the ground, and his strict teaching expression immediately switched into one of deep concern. From teacher mode to dad mode.
すまなかった雪村君。俺としたことがついつい熱が入ってかなり無茶な練習を。
I'm fine. The fact that you forgot and ended up teaching me that way even though I'm not your student? Thank you. It made me really happy.
そうか。そう言ってもらえると少しは救われる気がするよ。
His face was a mixture of relief and guilt.
しかし本当にすまなかった。こんな風に稽古をつけるのは久しぶりで、昔を思い出してつい厳しくしてしまったよ。
You mean before you came to Kyoto?
その通り。俺とトシ、宗司に源さんは司令官という道場で天然理心流を学んでね。それ以外に三男君、東堂君、長倉君、原田君が転がり込んでいたよ。そういえば斉藤君も顔を出していたな。今は機会も減ったが、あの頃はよく互いに手合わせもしたものだ。
If I remember correctly, talk of the old days came up once one night when everyone was well into their sake. Kondo's family were farmers, but it was discovered that he had remarkable skill at sword fighting. The owner of Shiei Hall decided to adopt him so he could continue training, and that's where he met Hijikata-san, along with everyone else. It must have been rough, doing all that training.
確かに厳しかったが、今とはまた違う意味で充実していたよ。
He gazed off into the distance, clearly reminiscing, and I felt a tiny pang of envy. If I had been born and raised near Mibu, would I have met all of them under different, better circumstances? Kondo-san turned to look down at me kindly, a gentle smile on his face.
先ほど雪村君は門弟ではない私になんてことを言っていたが。
Huh?
今、天然理心流4代目である俺が直々に指導したということは、ある意味では君も天然理心の門下だ。いわば、トシや宗司、源さんとも同門ということになるな。
Thank you. It was obviously not official, and it was barely a day's worth of instruction, but I was happy. I couldn't stop smiling. My heart felt so light. Kondo-san, I'm so grateful. Thank you for today. I wish we got more moments like that. Ah! My mind and heart were still reflecting on the wonderful thing that just happened. I returned to my room with my head held high. I've been staying there for a while now, but sometimes I still felt like I was baggage to them. They needed me for one thing and one thing only. I was never really a part of them, nor did I belong. But now, Kono-san's word filled in some of the holes in my heart. Just a little. But I treasured the feeling. Smiling, I collapsed onto my futon. The strain and fatigue from earlier was a good feeling, and I let it drag me under to sleep. And here is where we stop for the day. This is a familiar spot where we stopped at least once, I think. Save. Make sure it's loaded. Yep. Wow. But anyway, this is where we stop for today. We'll be back tomorrow with more of Hijikata's Route. Today at 9 p.m. EST, we are going to come back with some art stream where I have to finish animating. I put myself in this situation, so I have no one to blame but myself. But also, we might be doing a bit of a fun art piece before I get into animation hell. And we'll be back then. I hope you enjoyed today's start of Hijikata's Route, and I'll see you guys later. God damn it, you bring the tea now, Ghost! Really? At the end? Fucking, I don't have tea ready for tonight. I mean, I don't know. I could whip something up, but I don't have tea right now, okay? I'll think about it. And if it is tea, it might just be more Neko and Koji. Because they're stuck in my brain. Anyway, goodbye. I'll see you guys later. I'm gonna go eat some dinner.